Okay, today me and Lonna are going to record something to talk about how the financial system in the United States is rigged to keep the little man down.
They're trying to keep the poor man down. The poor man down.
That's me.
I'm
me. I'm the poor man. I make a good wage and yet can't save any money because it all goes to the government.
Goes in somebody's pocket. And it's not ours.
Well, one thing what we're seeing, I wanted to talk about is that the Fed keeps raising interest rates. You know, when the economy is good, they talk about, oh no, there's going to be inflation. We can't have that. So we're going to raise the interest rates. That somehow keeps what it does is it stifles the economy, because now you can't buy a house. Interest rates they were like 3% about 2 years ago. You can get a mortgage for about 3%. Go ahead. Yeah, I've got this on my nose so that my nose doesn't get sunburned.
Okay, you need to explain that to him.
I've got a nose guard so that my nose doesn't get sunburned.
Yeah, he sunburns really easily.
So about 2 years ago, you could get you a mortgage for about 3%. And now I think it's probably about 5%. And the Fed's raised the rates, I think, 7 times in the last 2 years. They say they're going to raise at least another 3 times next year and probably twice in 2020. And what that does then is it makes it harder for you to borrow. It makes it harder for you to borrow, then, you can't afford a house anymore because the house prices go up. I mean, there's a huge difference in that. I know when we tried to get a house in California, when I first got it, it was a higher interest rate. I don't remember the numbers exactly, but it was a higher interest rate, and $200 a month was going toward the principal, and the rest was going to interest. But then the interest rates went down, refinanced it, I think it was a year later, maybe been 2, a year later, and all of a sudden $400 is going to principal. It doubled the amount that was going to principal, because the way these mortgages are worked, you say, well, the interest rates didn't go up that much, and it was maybe a 1% savings. It wasn't that big of a deal. But the thing is with these mortgages is they say the interest rate is 5%, let's say, for 30 years, but the 5% is just an average for the entire 30 years. You're paying a lot more than that at first, because they're counting on you to go bankrupt, to not make your mortgage payment, and then the bank has to take over your house. So you think you're paying 5%. Well, yeah, if you pay it for the entire 30 years, it averages out to 5%, but it's a lot higher at first. They don't tell you about that stuff. And so if the interest rates, that was just a 1% change in interest rates. I think about that, where the principal amount was doubled just because I went down a 1%. And so now it's gone up 2%. That makes a lot bigger difference in how much is going to principal. And they tell you when you buy a house, they tell you, buy the most that you can afford. Well, they do that so that you'll pay more in interest, and that eventually you lose your job, or somebody going to hospital or something. You can turn here. Something will happen that you will lose your house, and then they get to keep it. So that's why they tell you that. You shouldn't buy the most you can afford, because then you're into debt too much, then you can't keep it. It's just, that's how the stock market crashed in 1929. People were borrowing money and they were putting it in and investing it. And then when the stock market crashes, they get all the financial companies get all the money. And so that's what they're doing with the housing market. It's all about getting you to give them as much money as possible up front with these high interest rates, and then they end up bankrupting you, and then they take over the house. And so when the economy is doing good, they raise the interest rates so that they can get more money from you, because you've got more money to give them. And then when the economy crashes, then you can't afford your payments, and then they get the house. So either way, this manipulating of interest rates is all about making sure that they get to take money from you and put it in while you take as much money from you as possible while you're working, and put it in their own pocket because, well, yeah, you're saving it. Some of it's going to equity and it's in your pocket. Well, that's assuming that you are able to keep those payments going for 30 years. And that you don't, even if you do keep your payments going, you're probably going to have to refinance because, oh, you need a new roof or you need some major repair on the house. So I'll take out an equity line of credit on there, write out a check for that. Okay, so now you don't get to pay it off in 30 years. Now it's 40 years. Well, then there's going to be a new roof again, and there's going to be some major damage or something's going to happen. And the bottom line is they just keep pushing it out where they keep getting interest payments and keep getting you more into debt until the point, and they keep getting money from you. So they raise the interest rates when the economy is going good because that way they can get more money from you because you've got more money. And then when the economy is doing bad, oh, it's a recession, we need to lower the interest rates. Well, that's because people can't afford the houses anymore because the economy has gone bad. So then they lower the interest rates, and now that you can afford the house, and it's all about manipulating it to where they get more of your money in interest when times are good, and they get less of your money when times are bad. But they do that just because they've got to find that balance where they can get you to go into a 30-year debt agreement, and which is really a lifetime debt agreement because you're going to have to refinance for major repairs, or when the economy is good, they'll have these HGTV shows that talk about remodeling. So then you end up spending $20,000 on a new kitchen, or you add a new room that's $50,000, or whatever you do, and it's all about keeping you in debt for your entire life. So that's the housing thing. And now there's a big push on getting you to try to rent instead. Well, again, then they get to keep all the money that way. It's a guaranteed. You're just giving them all the money up front. At least with a house, you're at least saving some money, and then they manipulate the interest rates in the economy so that they can get you to default on that and get the money. But if you're smart about it and don't put too much into debt like that, and you've got a stable job, maybe you get to keep that, and maybe you do have some equity and get to own your own house. There are people that get in that situation. But if all you do is rent, and they push that idea and how great that is, well, then you don't get to keep any of your money. All of it's going to the people that own it. And guess what? I mean, there's always going to be people that own the houses. So if everybody's renting, then it means corporations are owning the houses, and rather than individuals, and you're renting from the corporations. That's what these big apartment complexes and associations are. So they take your biggest expense is a house, and they take that away like that. And of course, cars, the same thing. Interest rates, they manipulate that stuff too, so that you probably don't own a car. And oh, guess what? Now you should just lease a car. So then we get to keep all your money that way. So it's all about taking the money away from you. And then on top of that, when you get a paycheck, they are going to take your money away there. Half of my money goes to taxes. I have a state retirement plan, and I have a Social Security retirement. That's about 15% of my income gone off the top. I didn't say, oh, I do or do not want to enroll in Social Security, or I do or do not want to enroll in state retirement. I don't have an option.
I told Eric, I said, when we were discussing this morning, I said, really, a state retirement plan, and this is for all schools, it's mandatory that they take 8% out of your paycheck. And I told Eric, I said, that's like double taxing you. I said, they really can't do that. I said, they can't force you to that you have to give 8% to go into a retirement plan. Your so-called retirement plan is Social Security, which everybody knows there ain't no money in it. But the thing is the fact that they weren't given the option. They were told they're going to have 2 retirement plans, and Eric and everybody knows if you've got money from a retirement plan, Social Security is not going to give you all your money. You can't get money from both, and if you do, Social Security is not going to give you all the money that you're entitled to.
Well, first off, Social Security and Medicare, you give money to that, that's just like throwing it down a black hole. You're not getting that money back because they keep reducing the benefits and everything because they're not they're not taking that money and saying, okay, this is the money that Eric put in here, and we're going to invest it, and we'll get interest, and then we'll give Eric that money when he retires. They take that money and they give it to people who's already retired, but primarily where it's going now and what's bankrupting the system is they're giving money to people who didn't put any money in. You know, it was fine at first if all it is people work and then they put the money in there and they save it for retirement and they give it to them when they retire. But now they're giving it to people who have Social Security disability, and then the Medicare is going to people who are on welfare. I mean, look at the prisons. They get better health coverage than I do, and I'm paying over $300 a month for my health coverage. And on top of that, if I ever have anything like a surgery or something, not only am I paying $300 a month, I'm paying extra money for co-pays and everything. Oh, well, that wasn't covered in, that particular person wasn't covered in the process, so that's a $2,000 bill. You know, you got all these costs in addition, and I'm supposedly saving money for Medicare. That's supposed to be so I have free health insurance when I retire. But people who have Medicare now, they're paying, well, they got to pay extra for Part F, and they got to pay extra for Part D, and it only covers maybe Part A or maybe part of Part B, and I don't know how it all works. Before, you had to, it was full medical insurance coverage, and you paid that 2% out of your paycheck. Now, it goes to people who are on welfare, it goes to people who are in the prisons, and there isn't money there. So then they charge you $300 a month just for your Medicare coverage. I thought I paid for that already. Social Security, same thing. It's going to people who are on disability, unemployment, taxes. It's going to people who, it's not going to me. I'm paying for other people. I don't get that money. So then they delay the retirement age for Social Security. Then they reduce the benefit. And it's like Lonna says, because I've got a mandatory state and a mandatory Social Security, that's 15% of my paycheck taken away that I can't do anything with. And when I get there, they're going to say, oh, Social Security windfall provision. For those who have government pensions, you know that even if you pay into both systems, your Social Security is going to be reduced because they're saying, oh, you're getting too much money in retirement. First off, no one's getting rich off of Social Security and state retirement unless you're like Nick Saban and you're in the state retirement system and making $12 million a year. But most government people do not make much money. And even the high officials in the government, they don't make nearly what you find in private. I mean, CEOs make millions of dollars a year. You don't find that with a city manager. City manager maybe makes $200,000. Large city, maybe $500,000, maybe. And the equivalent, though, in private is going to be millions of dollars that they would make as a CEO versus a city manager. So no one's getting rich on these retirement systems. So there is no windfall. And besides, even if there was a windfall, I paid into both systems. You took 15% of my paycheck to go to retirement, and now you're going to reduce it because you're saying I'm getting too much in retirement? Well, that's your own fault. You should reduce my percentage now and give me less in retirement, or keep my percentage the same and give me my full retirement that I paid 15% of my paycheck for.
I told Eric.
You can't be taking money away from me that I put in there. That's not right. You're stealing money from me.
Yeah, and I told Eric, I said, in Alabama, you don't have the option of choosing, especially with we're talking about the schools. You don't have the option. A teacher or anybody that works with the schools does not have the option of saying, okay, I'd rather have my retirement plan with Social Security. Or I'd rather have my retirement plan with the state retirement plan. They force you to take it. You got to take both. You got to take both. And that, like I said before, that's double dipping. You can't do that.
And they do it. And then they don't give me everything that I put into it because they're giving it to the people who are on Social Security disability, people who are on welfare, people who are in the prisons. They get all that money. And then another thing we're talking about is a lot of this stuff, the federal stuff, is unconstitutional anyway. They started a federal income tax in 1913, and Social Security started in 1930s, I think it was, and Medicare, I want to say Medicare is 1980 when it became mandatory for at least the state systems. I know it started before that for everybody else. But all this stuff is mandatory now: Social Security, federal income tax, and Medicare. What a lot of people don't realize is that the United States of America was founded with the Constitution, and it was supposed to be a loose. The Constitution is all about a loose arrangement so that the states could work as a whole country while giving independence and all the power to the states. A lot of what the Civil War was about, it wasn't about slavery, it was the power of the states. And when Abraham Lincoln was on the ballot, he was not on the ballot of, I believe, 11 of the 13, not 13, that's original colonies, but I think it was about 11 of the southern states. He wasn't even on the ballot. They couldn't have voted for him. And yet he is their president. And the Civil War wasn't about slavery. There was slavery in the North, there was slavery in the South. And the rich people benefited from both systems. And they were oppressing black people in the North as much as they were in the South. It was just a big corporation in the North as opposed to plantations in the South. It was small business versus large business. But anyway, the whole purpose, the whole reason for the Civil War was that they did not have representation. That they didn't even not have the opportunity to vote for Abraham Lincoln, and he's our president. And the South says, he's not going to be our president. We didn't vote for him. And there was the Civil War. It was over the constitutionality of having a president, someone to rule over you, who you didn't even have a chance to vote for. And people that were alive back in 1776, and that time when, well, this is Constitution 1789, Bill of Rights, they understood that document was all about, the Civil War was only about 70 years removed from that. And they understood that Constitution and the Bill of Rights and all that was, we are going to have a United States. It's not a government that rules over us at the federal level. Each state gets to have its own state government and have its own independence. And then there are just some loose powers that we give to a federal government just to keep us all in one country, while each state operates pretty much independently. And because of that, then, a federal income tax, Social Security, and Medicare, all of this taxation at the federal level is illegal. I mean, that's how we came over here in the first place. It came over here in England, says they wanted to tax our tea, and they threw the tea into the ocean and says, no taxation without representation. We're not going to pay the federal government this tax. We are states and we're independent of England. And so then they start the war, the American Revolution, and they end up, I mean, look at your history books. That's what happened. They end up creating their own country, and they say, we don't want the same thing to happen in England to happen to us here. Therefore, each state is going to maintain their independence. And so the taxing power of the federal government is unconstitutional. Federal income tax, Social Security, Medicare are all unconstitutional. The state can have a state retirement system and have things if the state votes that stuff in, but not the federal government, because we were supposed to retain our powers as individual states. So really, that whole system is unconstitutional. And the bad part about what's going on is that they take the money from the people that work and then they give it to the other states that don't work. California is a huge beneficiary of federal money because they have more population in California than any other state. And they take that money and they give it to people who don't work there. The unemployment and welfare and the things that they give there in California are a lot higher than they are here, say, in Alabama and other states. Well, they take our money and they give it to California. And it's because it goes to the federal government, and then the federal government doles it out to the different states based upon what's needed. And there's more of a need in California because there's more people there, and there are more people who aren't working there, so then they give it to the California and they take it away from Alabama. That's why a federal tax and Social Security and Medicare are all illegal, because the founding fathers of this country wanted to keep that from happening. That was what was happening in England. They rebelled. They had a revolution. They said no taxes. They threw the tea out in the harbor there. And now we've got the same exact situation here in America, although it's worse. And so you don't get to keep your money. You don't have any say over it. And and the whole system, the retirement system, that's another scam too. We talk about the state thing. Well, if I don't get 10 years in, the money I'm going to get, my contributions back will get back to me, but any contributions that the state made on behalf of me are gone. You know, at least Social Security, you pay into that system, you pay a tax, and then the government or the employer pays the same amount into that system as well. Same thing happens with state retirement systems. But if I'm not vested in the state, I've worked 6 years here in Alabama. If I move to Tennessee or I move to Florida, I mean, we're 30 minutes away from Florida. If I move over here to Florida, start working for them, I lose my 6 years. Oh, I get whatever I gave. Let's say I gave $10,000 over 6 years. I get that money back, but it's got to go on a 401k. I get taxed on it if I take the money, and I lose what the state put into it. So I lose the employer contribution. I only get my contribution. And if I had $10,000, well, then it's going to be taxed at regular income, which is the marginal tax rate's going to be real high. So then I got to pay higher taxes on that. Then if I take it out before I'm 59 and a half, I get a 10% federal tax penalty, and I get a state tax penalty. I don't know what that is. It's less, but it's still a penalty. And the result is, if I had $10,000, if I want that money now, I end up getting maybe $2,500 of it. And that's the same thing with all these 401k too. They try to say, save for your retirement, save for your retirement. Well, what about now? You're already taking 15% of my money that's going to retirement by force, and now you want me to give an extra 5% voluntarily? Oh yeah, you won't have to pay taxes on it. It's great, it's deferred. Oh yeah, it's great, it's deferred, and it's savings, but the thing is, yeah, I don't pay taxes on it now, but they're counting on the fact that I'm going to have some emergency, because guess what? The economy turned bad and I lost my house, so now I got to rent, and I need to get some money. So now I got to take the money out of the retirement. Now I got to pay regular income tax, plus I got to pay the 10% penalty. And so the reason they got these retirement things set up is because it's just a quicker way to bankrupt people. It's saying, let's take the money now. Oh, the government, we don't have to pay taxes, so then we'll save it away in a 401k. But most people end up having to take money out of that 401k because of the things that happen in life. I don't need to save it for retirement. Didn't we already have that plan? Didn't we already establish Social Security and Medicare so that I didn't have to save money for retirement? I was a mandatory tax taken out so that I don't have to worry about living income and health insurance because the government is going to take care of it. And aren't I already saving for retirement? Well, no, we gave that money to people who aren't working. So now you don't get the Social Security, and the Medicare isn't enough to pay for your expenses. So then you got to save more money for retirement. And then we're going to take that money away from you if you have to take it away, if you need the money, which chances are by the time you get 59 and a half, you're either going to have a kid who's in financial trouble, or you're going to have yourself, you're going to lose your job, or the economy gets bad. Something's going to happen. Medical expenses, whatever, where you got to take that money out, and then you pay more taxes on it there. Go ahead.
Well, just to give you an example, when my mother retired, she worked 25 years for this doctor, and he had a plan where she gave a portion of her money, he put some money in, and it was a retirement. It was a small office, but he made, he wanted to make sure that they had a retirement plan. The longer you work for him, when you retire, you get this nice cushy, retirement money. Well, she got, I'm just going to say 10,000. She got more than that, but I'm not going to say how much. But we'll say she got $10,000. Well, immediately when she retired, it had to roll over to a retirement plan. Well, next thing I know, Eric's like, well, she needs to start taking some of that money out. And I'm like, why? Because she's going to, lose it or something?
Well, you start taking money out because they tax you based upon your annual income. Yeah. And so if you have an annual, there's a standard exemption. She's taking care of her mother too, so she claims head of household with a dependent, and so there is a standard amount, and Trump just doubled that, by the way, and whatever it is, let's say it's $10,000. Well, I can take the $10,000 out tax-free. So let's say you have $100,000 in a retirement account. Now you're retired, start taking money out. you better take $10,000 a year out, because that way it's tax-free, because the first $10,000 a year is exempted. But if you're relying upon Social Security and you don't need the money, still take it out, because that way you get at least up to your standard deduction, so that you don't pay taxes on it. But if you wait until you actually need it, then you take $20,000 out, well, now you got to pay taxes on the $10,000 because it's above your standard deduction.
So either
throwing
way,
those numbers out there. And even if you don't need it and you don't take anything out, well, once you get 70 and a half, they require, or 70, I think it is, they require that you start taking money out. And if you don't, they're just going to take it out anyway.
Yeah.
They're going to take it for themselves.
Yeah.
So either way, they're going to get your money. So this retirement, deferred taxes sounds great, but they're going to take the taxes anyway.
Yeah.
And most people, there's a way you can get up to your standard deduction, but Joe Blow out there doesn't know that. They don't know these tax rules. They just know what they're told, and they don't tell you that. They don't tell you, be sure to take up to your standard deduction. No one ever tells you that. Go ahead.
Well, the thing is, what's the purpose of a retirement thing when they, like you said, they tell you, there won't be any taxes taken out. Oh, yeah, it will later on. So why not just take the taxes out and give her money? But no, they made her put it in a retirement plan, and if she didn't, she was going to get penalized anyway. So she was going to get money taken out if she didn't put it in a retirement plan, and then she does, and she's still going to get penalized, because if she reaches a certain age, and she doesn't take it out, they're going to penalize her and take more of the money. So really, technically, these retirement plans are useless, because you're putting your money in something that you'll never get your money out of.
Basically what it is, in summary, because we're going to have to quit here pretty soon. In summary, the United States is a communist country now. It's all about, if you make a whole bunch of money, then we're going to take more taxes from you. And we're going to take that money and we're going to give it to the people who are poor. But then there are the people who really control everything, like the Federal Reserve, the really super rich people, like the Federal Reserve, and they're the guys who, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And that's what a communist society is. You look at Russia and what they did. They were the elite people who were just wealthy beyond imagination, while everybody else stood in line just to get some bread. They didn't have any money. And that's what the United States has done by having these taxes. But, if you said a communist, we're going to be communist now, well, then they would have rebelled and there'd be war and everything. So they just cleverly create a system, the Federal Reserve, where they tweak the interest rates so that they can make you default on houses so that they get your money there. And the tax system, where they rob from the rich to give to the poor. And the retirements, 401ks, and these retirement systems, state retirement systems and things like that. Social Security and Medicare. All this stuff unconstitutional is to take the money away from the people who are working and give it to the poor people, so that way the people who are working can't afford to live themselves, so then everybody goes bankrupt, or if they don't go bankrupt, they're at least having trouble making ends meet. I have trouble making ends meet and I have a good paying job. Well, that's because half of my money I don't get to keep. If I got to keep my money, I'd have a house paid off, be fine. But now we're struggling to make it, even though I got a good paying job, because 15% goes to retirement. Then I've got federal tax. Then I got state tax. Then I got Medicare. And then of course, everything else that you have, sales tax and all the other tax, vehicle registration, gas tax, and on and on and on and on and on. They take so much of my money that even though I went to college, got a degree, and got a good paying job and worked hard, I still live paycheck to paycheck because of all these taxes that I got to pay, and they're taking the money away. It's all because they've created a communist society right under our very noses. We fought the Cold War to get out of communism, and secretly the U.S. is creating a communist society and putting everybody in bondage under that. The rich get rich, the poor get poor, and we're all in the same. The middle class gets destroyed.
Oh, one other thing. Back in the day, retirement, Social Security, you could retire at 55. Then, as I got older, they decided, no, you had to be 60. Then they pushed it up to 62. Then they pushed it up to 65. I got something in the mail that says the time I can retire, no lie, I should have the paper to show it to you. I can't retire until I am 72 years old. 72 years old. So everything they're taking out of my paycheck, which I ain't got no paycheck, but if I had a paycheck, everything they are taking out of my paycheck, Florida's got some rough roads. Everything taken out of the paycheck, I'm not getting it back. Because, number one, I ain't gonna live long enough to see it. So why not just give me my money now?
Well, the idea is that you don't get a retirement check until you're 3 months from death.
Yeah, well,
and they get to keep all your money.
Well, I think it's shortened now. I think it's like 1 day before you die. That's when you get it now.
So, there you go. That's the society we're in, the United States. Comment below. Thanks for watching.